Hello, thank you so much for joining Leaders in Clinical Research today. We are welcoming Danielle Rothman. And Danielle Rothman is a teaching artist and business coach. She has a wealth of knowledge. And I will preface this by saying I was brought to this idea of creative rest through a close friend of mine, Sumana Jetty, who has her own website where she's devoted to wellness topics as well and avoiding burnout. But I'll let you explain, Danielle, how you got started in this field, because I feel like it's connected very closely to what Sumana does.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi again, I'm Danielle. And actually, it is my origin story. So, at about 5 years, no, actually longer now, 6 years ago, it was the height of the coloring book craze. And I was working at a nonprofit, small 6-person organization, doing great work, but like exhausted, working 6 days a week, sometimes more. And I needed a break. So my friend bought me a coloring book. And it is not hyperbole to say that my coworker changed my life. She bought me that coloring book. It took me 3 months to open it because, like I said, super busy nonprofit life. But when I did, it opened my eyes to all the ways that you could be creative as an adult. Growing up, I sang and acted, and I thought you can only choose either performing or it's not a thing. You can be creative in as many ways as you want. But I had this idea in my head that I couldn't draw. And so I told myself that for so long that it really came as a surprise to me when I started coloring. And I was like, oh, I'm pretty good at that. So within 6 months, I turned this coloring hobby into a career. And now I've had my business for 5 years now as a modern calligrapher, watercolorist, illustrator, all the crafty things. But really the one closest to my heart is teacher. So I've been teaching in some capacity since, well, forever, but really since college. I have a master's in higher ed. And when I discovered I could combine the art that I was doing with teaching, that was my big aha moment. So that's been something that's been really close to my heart. So I totally know what you mean about creative rest. I call it a creative palate cleanser. Even now that I'm doing creative work, sometimes you just need to do something really different and like shock yourself out of it. So like my husband and I went on a trip and we learned how to make stained glass charms, like totally out of my comfort zone, but just needed to do something a little different to like kind of stretch other muscles. There's a great Maya Angelou quote that you can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have. And I think that's just so true.
I think that's great. And, so much of what you say, I connect with because I work in business. I work in clinical research. It's very fast paced, business oriented, not a lot of time for creativity, but in a way that can harm everyone, right? We need to take those breaks for creativity because it leads to innovation in other areas. So it's all connected. Even if you are doing something like a coloring book, that can be a great reset for your brain.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And that's something. So I've done a bunch of different things. I have a line of journals, cards, and prints. I used to vend at Chelsea Market and thousands of people like that. It was wonderful. But primarily my focus now is actually corporate workshops. So that's exactly what I do. So the bulk of my work now is having team building workshops with companies, either in the health or tech sectors, working with people who maybe don't think that they're creative or think they can't be creative. So one of my mantras that I said for myself was stop stopping yourself, because I told myself for so many years I couldn't draw. Once I let myself do it, I really pleasantly surprised myself. And that's what I see from most of my students. They'll come in going, oh, I can't draw, I can't be creative, I can't do these things. And once they have a forum where someone says, not only you can, but you will, they end up creating something and they surprise themselves with how great it looks and how proud they are at the end. And so it's been really cool. I've had some classes, especially now, with the pandemic being virtual, I've had classes with teams all around the world who maybe haven't gotten to work together in real time before, especially if there's a time difference. And they aren't able to share ideas. And so I've had groups where we'll brainstorm like how to draw something. And afterwards, like people will say, I've never been able to brainstorm with that team. Like I'm going to do that more now in my work. So it's really interesting how having a shared creative experience can have, other effects. And in that class, actually, we wrote Be Fearless. So a lot of
Oh,
what I
that's so
write,
pretty.
yeah, so a lot of what I write in classes are like an affirmation or a team value. This one, they didn't have any coloring supplies, so we just did black and white, and it came out pretty awesome. Um, so that's really cool, and that's why I like having the live experiences, because there's that room for discovery. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool, and I really found this niche with corporate, because it's one thing for someone to sign up for my class. Like, I teach twice a month with Brooklyn Brainery, and people, like, I love my bullet journal class that I do, and people come to it and they're so interested, and they have all the supplies and they get excited. But I just would much rather have, not that I don't love them, but I'd much rather have that student who comes in, they're like, have my daughter's Crayola and a highlighter and a Sharpie I stole from my secretary. Like, what can we make with this? And then I
Mm-hmm.
show them, you can watercolor with the Crayola, and you can do all these other things. And they're like, oh my God, I have that in me. Which is like a really fun discovery. Yeah, I
I love
work with,
that. I
yeah.
love that. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the supply thing. That was something that was kind of in the back of my head, because when you're working corporate, you usually don't have a lot of art supplies, but like highlighters, yeah, you would have that. Maybe a red pen and a black and a blue pen. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's why, I mean, and this is just a few of the classes I did over the holidays. And so you can see it said Happy Holidays. But it really is based on what they're working with. And so every class, what we do is different, because it's what they have. So this was one, they had colored pencils. We did this with Origins. And so that's how that looked. And like, it's just been really interesting to see and be guided by those supplies. This one had watercolor pencils. Someone had those. I also offer kits. So I can do a kit either with markers or with watercolors. Actually, I'm doing a class, Watercolors for Wellness, this week, where we're using these really cool watercolor sheets. So kits are a thing if we want them to have supplies. But as much as I love the kits, and this is what the markers look like, as much as I love them, I do also love the idea of, like, what do you have around your house? I
Mm-hmm.
have thousands of art supplies. I am obsessed. And so they'll hold something up and be like, wait, I have that. And sometimes I get stumped. Like, I had someone had oil pastels in a
Mm-hmm.
floral class recently. And I was like, I've never used oil pastels in class. And I had my whole table was covered. And so that's really fun too. Like, when people have stuff and they're like, what do I do with this? Because the point of making art is not that you need to have the best things all the time. It's you use what you
Mm-hmm.
have how you can. But to that end, when I do kits, when I am providing them, the kits that I provide are always artist quality, always highest level. These are double-sided, so you can use them in a regular notebook. So I'm always keeping an eye towards like how you can use them, not just for art, but in your everyday. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
taking notes in a pink pen just makes me feel better. So having that, or having a watercolor kit that you can take to the park with you,
Mm-hmm.
I personally find really inspiring. So my hope is that people leave my class not just with like, that was a great experience, but like, oh, maybe I'll sit and like make a card this weekend, or I can sit with my daughter or niece or nephew or somebody. Can't tell you how many
Mm-hmm.
times kids just randomly show up in my classes
Yeah.
to like do this as a family activity together.
I think that's awesome to involve the family and to have this be a part of your kind of everyday, right? Like taking 30 minutes for yourself during the workday to kind of doodle or do something creative that might lead to your mind expanding into some other realm. And
And honestly, it doesn't need to be that crazy. Like, I take all of my notes, and I have for years, with a black Pilot pen. This is my tool
mhm,
most of the time. So it's as simple as, if I'm taking notes, doodling in a margin, letting myself go crazy with a header. There's so many things you can do
mhm,
that are little moments of creativity that aren't maybe as intimidating as I'm going to sit for 30 minutes and block off that
yeah.
time. But just ways to kind of like zen out a little bit.
And what do you say to those perfectionists that, like you mentioned earlier, that think, oh, I can't draw, so I'm not going to try, or mine doesn't look like the teacher's, and so it's just terrible. People get so embarrassed about art for some reason. It's something that is very personal to us. I think it's because maybe we put ourselves into it and it's out there for others to judge. So what are some tips or things that you say to those perfectionists to get them started?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. I like to joke that I'm a recovering perfectionist, but to be totally honest, I'm still a perfectionist. I try to give myself slack. And I see that with things like I have my own planner and like I haven't updated it in a few days because like, oh, it's not as pretty as other people's. Or so we all get in our own heads. So that's one thing I tell them. Like it's a unfortunate reality that our eye develops faster than our skill set. So when you start to learn something new, especially something creative, your ability to curate and to know what's good is something that way outpaces your ability to do it. So what ends up starting is the idea of the enthusiastic beginner. So everything's great, things are going great. And then once you learn a little bit more, suddenly your perception of your skill level goes way down and you have to get yourself back out of that. So if you know what looks good and you think what you're doing is crap, you're actually on the right track, which is sometimes a hard thing to recognize. Um, so that's one thing. Another thing I always say in my classes is I've done this every day for 5 years. You've done this for 5 minutes. Cut yourself some slack. You know, everyone was a beginner at one time. You have to push through that. And I was really lucky. So like when I first started, I started with these pens that are very big and broad. And with calligraphy, you actually do better starting with a smaller tip pen. So I was doing these for a month and I threw it across the room and I was like, I can't do this. And then I didn't touch it for another month until I finally found this other pen. And when I found this other pen, something clicked. And the only time I filled a whole sketchbook in one weekend, but I filled the whole sketchbook and I was like, okay, this is it. I found my thing. And I used that as my like foot in the door. So every other discipline I've picked up, I've gone through this idea of lettering. So I do embroidery, lettering, watercolor with lettering. And so just finding that way in. So I would say kind of sharing that, like, be patient with yourself. It's okay. We all have those moments. And then find your way in. That kind of makes sense. And then the third thing I say, I have a couple of students who are kids. I love kids. I'm a very proud aunt. My nephews are 12 and 14. And I love playing with them. And I have this student, I've been working with her for over a year and a half now. And she's fearless. She's my creative spirit animal. And we'll talk about something and we're like, okay, we're going to draw this today. And she's like, okay. And she's got her supplies and she's taken our reference photo and just done cool things with it. And I pull so much inspiration from her because I see her and the other kids I work with. I say, okay, we're going to do a thing. And they jump in. They don't take time to think about it. They jump in and they don't copy exactly. They never do. They automatically just inherently know to make changes based on what they like or what they can't do. And they create something that's always super cool and always super unique. So I always try to channel her when I'm like a little afraid, like it must look the same. It's like, that's not the point. It shouldn't look the same. Like, feel free to use different colors, try another style. Like it should reflect you, even if you're copying a project. So I always say think of her because that way that kids attack it and just go for it, I think is something adults, we just need more of in our lives. Like there's no mistakes here. It's okay. And I try to keep that in mind.
That's awesome. I love it. I love this idea too of being virtual. I think you had mentioned you were virtual before it was cool to be virtual.
Yeah.
I also was virtual because I've been home based for the past 8 years, but it's interesting to be able to do things like classes and group activities that before pandemic were maybe face to face and I didn't have the opportunities because of where I lived or my schedule. But now with things being virtual, I feel like a lot of things are open now, or like more open, more opportunities. And do you see that as a positive for your classes? Has the virtual aspect helped students maybe even feel more comfortable, right? Because they're not sharing immediately with everyone.
You know, it's been really interesting. So I definitely, well, it was funny when the pandemic first started. I was like, well, wait a minute, you guys are freaking out about the day. I've had this every day. Like I already had my group set up. Like we would video chat on Fridays if we needed it. And it's like I was kind of laughing. Like, see, doing this is hard. Like now you know what we've been doing. But then actually, I hit Zoom fatigue incredibly quickly on a personal front. Like I went from having my things to there was so much available that I had to like stop doing stuff myself because it was just overwhelming. So I totally understand that from students. But As a teacher, it's been fantastic. When the pandemic started and quarantine started, I had actually been vending at Chelsea Market, which was super overwhelming because I went from this place, like, the time I'd vended before, I'd write people's names for them, and I'd written 4,000 names in 2 weeks. And then we were having this pandemic starting to happen, and every day I'm seeing fewer and fewer coming in. And then, of course, they had to shut us down. And so my mindset when I left that was, oh my God, my business is over. What do I do? And it took about a day, like a literal day. And I went, wait a minute, I've had these online classes. I haven't had much success with it. I think I might have the audience now. That day I scheduled 6 classes for the next week. I started booking my first corporate class with the Meatpacking District, actually. I was doing weekly classes with them, and I never stopped. And so that was really cool. It was like I had this like brief moment of panic, and then it was like, wait, I can do this, and I have been doing this. So it was definitely for me an opportunity. It was like I have this thing, and now I'm meeting a need. But it's been really interesting watching it develop as like we have names for it now, like virtual classes. Like I didn't know what to call it before, and now there's norms and there's things around it. So it's been kind of cool. I think, there's a lot of people who were not prepared to bring their in-person content online. And so I think, unfortunately, there's some stereotypes that like this isn't as interactive, this isn't as good, this isn't whatever, that took people some time to kind of break out of. And that's something like engagement is so important to me, especially for like bigger classes. Like I'm teaching my biggest class ever. It's 300 students next week. And I have 3 co-teachers who are all trained teachers, and like really focusing on engagement, because at this point, after 2 years, passive entertainment is not going to cut it for an interactive class environment. So like really looking for those ways to have people feel involved. And I think you're right about that comfort of being in your own home, but I think that it can be a double-edged sword. It's like people are comfortable at home, but then they don't always get that confidence of the immediate feedback that they get in a class, or they're not able to use my supplies. So they're like, ooh, do I have the right thing? So there can be a little bit of that unsureness. It kind of depends on the class. I'm one of those really annoying teachers who insists on you keeping your video on, because if I can see your face, I can know if you're getting it, and you can share things. And like, we see ourselves and kind of really build a community, in however much time we have. So I like that. The only thing I really miss from in-person classes is, I would never leave on time. There would always be someone talking after, and we would have that time for kids. And I had probably one of my favorite corporate classes ever last year for the holidays. We ended up staying on an extra hour just hanging out. And I just remember like feeling so happy to have that experience again, because I do miss a little of that, like one-on-one, because, it's Zoom, only one person can talk at a time. But I think as we become more comfortable with this, we found more ways to connect. And I follow up with my students all the time. We're always like emailing and chatting. And that's a really nice thing, like knowing I'm in the same place, so that if they do need something, I'm here and we can talk to each other. So so it's been really, that was a really long answer to your question. But virtual, like for me, has been really fun. I definitely want to do more of it. I think I found a thing, like, and also, we were talking about before the idea, yes, we're coming back in person for a lot of things, but I don't think the remote folks are okay being like shoved aside anymore. If you have a global team, I think the whole global team wants to be involved now. And there's so many opportunities, like I was saying before, about like the group maybe connecting with the group in India, or, just being able to meet across lines. And there's a lot of opportunities that we're just starting to explore now of how we can bring people together even more.
Yeah, I love the globalization of it, especially in my work in clinical research. We have people all over the world, like you said, India, and it's awesome to be able to see them on video when we can, and form that kind of connection. I do have a few more questions before I let you go, if it's okay.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. I wanted to get some of your background on your move recently, because I know you mentioned New York quite a bit in our conversation, but you're no longer in New York. So can you tell the audience where you are and what that looks like for your business?
Yeah, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina now. Never thought I'd say that. My husband and I were in Manhattan for a decade, officially say we were New Yorkers. I mean, I'm from Long Island, so I was always some form of New Yorker. He's from a town in Pennsylvania without a stoplight. And I thought once I got into the big city, I would never get him back out. But as much as I love New York, my family moved, my brother and his family moved down here to Charlotte 6 years ago, and a part of my heart went with them. So I kind of always knew from when they moved, I had a ticking clock above my head, but New York has such an amazing energy and there's so many opportunities there that for a long time, it felt like I couldn't give that up. Like I taught at the Guggenheim, and like that was incredible. It's because I met somebody, and I taught at Google because it's right above Chelsea Market. And I had a Google calligraphy emergency. They needed place cards for a dinner that night. I'm not, by NDA, I can't tell you who it was for, but it was so freaking cool to be like, hi, can you bring place cards down in 2 hours? Like, we're having this calligraphy emergency. Who knew that was a thing? And so the idea of giving that up was really hard. But the upside of pandemic with being virtual, suddenly that math changed, and knowing that I could work from anywhere really got my wheels turning. And I came to visit my family last year for Thanksgiving, and I went, I just can't be apart from you anymore. So it took a long time to break up with New York. We moved down to North Carolina in June, actually lived with my family for 6 months, which was absolutely incredible. Just so much warmth and family time. And I'm so lucky to have a brother like that in my life. And then we moved into our new house a month ago, and it's a house, not an apartment, it's a house. And in my new house, I have my filming areas, I have my desk and everything. And then I have an entire studio right next to me, so I can have classes, and my art supplies have room to breathe.
Yeah, it's amazing, like the prices outside of New York and people leaving, seeing that they actually can get houses outside of the city.
We went from a 2-room apartment, not 2 bedroom, 2 rooms. We had a combination kitchen, living room, and a bedroom apartment to a 2-bedroom house that we're renting, and we're paying $100 less. Like, how's that even a thing?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, but you'll miss it. You'll miss New York, I'm sure. There's positives out there, right?
I miss it a lot. So my brother lives in the suburbs, and he always has. And I missed it a lot when I lived near them because there just wasn't a lot that was walkable. That's the big thing, right? In New York, you can walk to so many different places. But the area I moved to in Charlotte, it's called Noda. It's really artistic, and it's got murals everywhere and restaurants. And there's this whole little strip that we can walk out. There's a restaurant literally in our backyard. Knowing I haven't used my car in like 3 weeks. I have a car, who knew? But like knowing that I can get to things every time I leave the house, I meet another really cool creative person. So no offense, New York, I still love you. But I'm actually really excited about where we are now.
That's lovely. I had been to North Carolina a few times for work, and it is very nice. And it has kind of that southern, like small town feel, but there's lots of, like you said, it's artsy and lots of murals and like very cool.
Yeah, it's pockets. There's like, just like anywhere else, right? Like, you can find, there's a little bit of everything. So, I mean, it's my little slice of Brooklyn. Is it Brooklyn? No. Is there as much as there is there? No. But creative people always find each other. So, finding that space. And when I lived in New York, I was up by the Cloisters Museum in the 180s. Yes, the numbers go up that high. So I was kind of like removed from a lot of that stuff. So in some ways it's like, oh, I'm closer. And like we're 10-minute drive from so many other things. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what the future will hold, but at least for now, I'm starting to feel that better. And then like we went to visit my brother's family yesterday, and we went right into our routine, and I was like, yes, this is why we're here.
Yeah, that's nice.
So yeah, that's good.
It's really nice. So how do people find you if they are interested in taking a class, or if they're interested in booking you for a corporate event? Where can they find you on the socials?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Rothburn's Creative. It will soon be changing to Danielle.Rothman. Just haven't quite made the switch over yet. But yeah, so I'll include the links. So Instagram's the best way to find me, keep in touch. Yeah, and then email. I'm a big email person. So it's Danielle@rothburnscreative.com. I have a website, rothburnscreative.com. And just like contact me and we can get going. As I said before, I teach twice monthly with Brooklyn Brainery. Those are open enrollment classes if you want to take a class. We have coming up watercolor florals. What else do we have coming up? bullet journaling, I always teach, hand lettering. And then if you want to do a private class, I also do private lessons online if you're in Charlotte in person. And then the corporate classes, of course, as well. And that's any teams, any size. I've taught 5 people. I will have taught 300 as of next week. So kind of all of that. And I have a corporate deck with all info and pricing and stuff. But really, like, what I find so exciting about the kind of work that I do is just how personalizable and customizable it all is. So yes, I have certain things I like to teach, but no workshop is ever the same. Even if I'm writing the same thing, it looks completely different. Like I have Happy Holidays, I wrote them twice, and different colors, different mediums. Like every time we create something is different. So if you're like not sure what you want to do, we can create that. But then I also, as I was saying before, do business coaching. So I've had my business for 5 years now, and there's so much I wish I knew back then. And when I was trying to find a coach, it was really hard because it was a lot of like, and I have a coach now who I love, but in traditional coaching, like you're going to find the answers, right? It's like kind of digging and helping you create that. But what I really needed was kind of more of a mentor, like what accounting software do I use and what printer do I buy? And hey, I have this harebrained idea. Is that going to sell? And so that's kind of more I do it. So I call them the unstuck sessions. So whether you're new or you're starting your business or you have an idea and haven't started yet, but just to kind of get unstuck. So we create an action plan for you to kind of figure out what that next step is. And like oftentimes people will come to me with a question, like I'll get a question like, how do you book corporate classes? And then by the time we're done, we will have answered a completely different question that's, I think, more aligned. I think sometimes people have an idea of like, I have to do this to make money. And it's like, no, you have to do what's true to you. And it's going to work organically based on you and your personality and what you're going to put into it and to create something really personal. So something that's attractive to you as well. So that's another side that I haven't really advertised much because I haven't really had to. All the clients I've worked with just kind of like been in my orbit, which is kind of exciting. I feel like when you're on the right track, when people are coming to you, asking you for the things that you want to give. I think it's a really cool thing to realize.
Yeah, it sounds like you're in the perfect place right now. So that's great. And before we end the interview, I like to ask all my guests if they have a book recommendation. So do you have a book recommendation for our audience?
Oh, man. All kinds of books. All the book recommendations. I will be the first to admit I don't read business books. I buy them. And for some reason, buying them makes me feel like I have absorbed their knowledge, even though I haven't. So I buy them a lot. But I don't really read the business books. The books that I usually read, I've been in a real like fiction kick lately, like fiction and fantasy. But most of the books on my bookshelf here are art books. I have a few different categories. So I guess my advice would be buy the books that are so pretty you smile every time you look at them. And then buy the books that teach you how to do something you're afraid to do. And that's really what my books kind of break down to. So I've got some like really pretty flower books and like vintage things that I just like looking at. And then ones that break down different techniques. I think if you're interested in hand lettering, I have 2. I have the yellow book and the blue book that are really good for copying. I'm like staring at the books as I look at it. They're really great for that. And then they don't publish it in English anymore, but if you can find an old copy of Flow magazine or their book, Everything, I think it's Everything Takes Their Time, or the book of everything. But Flow magazine has some really great content for creators. It was the first publication that I found that I felt spoke to me in where I was in this illustration, design, lettering, but like taught by myself, woman, starting my own business kind of headspace, huge push with mindfulness past few years. And so I have all of them. And they have a book that they publish every year. It's the book for paper lovers, and it's all blank with just different colors and kinds of paper, which is really rad.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's another one. So I would say, I like flower books, but whatever books make you smile when you walk by them, that's really the big one. I view books as friends. And so I'll just walk by and be like, hi, friend, it's nice to see you. And after having like most of my stuff in storage for 6 months, I'm like, I have my babies back
I know.
and my whole bookshelf. It's very exciting.
It's like you got to shop all over again with your own things.
Yes, I literally did that. I have a bookshelf with all blank notebooks because I cannot resist a blank notebook. And when I want to go
Mhm.
shopping, I just spin it and I just pick the notebook that I want.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Danielle. I know we went a little bit over, but I think this was such a great conversation, and I really just love the idea of taking time for yourself in the way of
Yeah.
creativity and not judging your creativity, but just go for it. Try something new.
Yeah, there's a saying I like to say is practice makes progress. We're not looking for perfection.
Mm. I love
And I think
that.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really important. And so I have a mantra every year. And last year, my mantra was put rest on your to do list. And
Mm.
that was such an important guiding principle because when I had time come up, my instinct was to fill it. And it's like, no, like filling up your cup is going to benefit you
Mhm.
and everyone around you in a better way than trying to fill up your schedule. So I
Mhm.
really super agree with what you were saying. And I hope, my hope is that after this talk that people are like, oh, I'm going to go play now. Whatever play
Mhm.
means to you, like taking some time to play and be joyful, I think it comes back to you in spades.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. It definitely bleeds into other areas of your life where you don't even expect it to, you know. Um, so I really appreciate your time today, Danielle. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank
inviting
you.
me.
Thanks. Bye bye.